Since it's now 12:16. Welcome everybody, and welcome to this fifth episode of Quincus Talks. We will be talking about food fulfillment and maximizing the food delivery opportunity. And here with us today, we have Eugène, Kastanja, and Apoorva Kumar. And I'll give a little short, brief introduction about who they are, so that, as well as myself. So I'm the Chief Product Officer for Quincus, and as well as co-founder. And what we do at Quincus is we build logistic solutions for transporters, and we are across the globe. So that in very short summary, but we're here to hear about Apoorva and Eugène. So Apoorva joined Jumia in 2013, and he's in charge of all supply chain operations and cross-border business across the group. His journey started in Nigeria, and since then he has managed a spectrum of roles in the company, such as setting a supply chain across the Jumia in countries and acting CEO of Jumia Egypt from 2017 to 2019. Before joining Jumia, Apoorva gained experience in retail and e-commerce with Flipkart, Titan, Tata Steel, and Tata Chemicals in India, as well as he holds an MBA from IIM Calcutta and in electronics. I think I still got it wrong. I'm sorry.
It's great.
And electronics engineering degree from VTU in India.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Eugène is an international supply chain specialist with best practice experience in all segments of logistics in Asia, specifically in fast-moving consumer retail, including management of F&B, product distribution for the world's largest F&B brands in Indonesia. So welcome both to you. So we'll dive in already. And one of the first questions that I've been kind of thinking about over these while we were preparing for this webinar was really about, what do you guys do when things spike? Like when faced with unpredictable orders and there's a driver shortage, there's order spikes, how does the technology such as route planning and dispatch management help food delivery fleets do more with less? Eugène, you want to tackle this one?
Yes, please. Apoorva, you go first.
Okay.
Look, I think it's fun, and it's the same time headache challenging this, but I think it's a good problem to have. Okay, I think I would rather have spikes than no business, but yeah, I think really on the problem solving, right? Most of the problem solving is done before, right? We typically have, let's say, a typical setup or a plan of what could go wrong, and then what are the triggers and what are the elements you would place in place, like any simple organization, PMO or whatever. Okay. Typically in spikes, you work on 3 or 4 axes. The 4 axes for us are the side of the merchant or the restaurant or the supermarket. The second axis is the side of the driver, the logistics, the driver capacity, etc. The third side of the axis or the dimension is on the customer side. How do you tackle the customer perception, customer expectations? And the fourth is obviously what you do internally with the tech, and all is a bit amalgamated. Okay. Whenever there is a spike, we typically very quickly are able to identify what restaurants, what dishes are getting it. And there is some historical knowledge of when that kind of spike happens, or do that restaurant has the capacity. Let me give an example which will make sense. I mean, one of the things which sells quite fast is something like noodles, chicken noodles or something. Okay. And we typically understand that, okay, we have some previous knowledge that, okay, after 200 orders of this dish, typically the restaurant will run out of stock. There is some previous data behind it. Okay, so there are some caps, etc. But obviously there's some proactive communication done with the restaurant. Okay, how are you doing, etc. Do you have the right level of manpower to manage it? So there is a team and there is a restaurant contingency plan. Okay. On the side of the drivers, there are a few things which we are able to change by system, and there are a few things which you have to do manually. Some of the few things which we change by system is something what we call as order assignment logic and order dispatch logic. Okay, order assignment logic is basically an order of restaurant A to customer Z. Which driver should it get assigned to and when? Okay, and there is a certain amount of delay you can introduce. You can introduce, typically we are assigning between 1 and 2 orders per open driver. We can take it to 3. Obviously, it's going to be a little bit impactful to the customer timeline. How do you club which 2 orders? We increase the radius, etc. So there is some real-time technology system. It's not tech, it's really configuration changes. Okay. And then the dispatch logic is really at what point do you start assigning the order to the driver. Okay, and there is a little bit of a data and intelligence which goes behind it, because for example, there is a, let's say there's a dish, chicken pasta, and there are already 25 orders in the kitchen. Okay, so you can take some time to say, that there is a certain waiting preparation time which is coming in. Okay, and you can sort of the whole idea is how to optimize the driver capacity available, and you do not want the driver to either wait at the restaurant or wait at the customer. So you put some AI behind. Okay, we can delay the dispatch of this driver by X minutes, etc. So that's a little bit on the driver side what we do. On the customer side, mostly it's simple terms. You send them some proactive communication that, hey, you know what, your order is going to get, we are experiencing some rush, etc., etc. Sometimes we do a little bit changing on the boosting app. For example, we know that, okay, this dish is getting too many orders. We want to take the load away from this dish or this restaurant. So we do some artificial boosting for some other offers or sort of do that. So I think that's really the 3 axis in very simple terms, how this operates. This is something which you experience every day, and by experiencing it every day, we also are typically getting better at things. And there is also a lot of thinking gone behind the planned spikes. Okay, I mean, most of the spikes which we experience now are planned and designed, so there is a certain level of preparation which goes in between. I mean, that's basically very high level.
And in terms of letting you know that, or you guys knowing, okay, they've ordered, let's say 200,000 or 200, or what, let's start with 200. How do you communicate that to them? Like in terms of, is it digitally? Is it them telling you that they're running low? Is there a technology behind it?
Yeah. Look, so in most of the food delivery platforms in the world, the most basic vendor technology allows the restaurant to onboard a particular dish, SKU, the price of the SKU, the pictures of the SKU, and the available stock to you, okay, at any given point of time. Then a second level is where they are also able to, they also facilitate uploading variants, uploading preparation time, etc. Okay, so then some of the more advanced backend platforms. So for example, right now I'm working on a backend platform which allows me to completely vertically integrate the restaurant ingredients. So for example, if I know that this dish requires 20 grams of chicken, 200 grams of peanut, I'm able to integrate the stock which the kitchen is holding. And that gives me one additional data point that, okay, this restaurant's going to run out of stock. Okay. So typically we have dashboards in which we are observing these data points at every given point of time, and we have the access. Okay, and then of course there is some, whenever you see abnormal behavior, you obviously, like for example, the preparation time of a certain dish is 20 minutes or 18 minutes. Okay, and then you're seeing, okay, what is going wrong? For the last 25 orders, this dish has taken 25 minutes to prepare. So when you see such kind of data points, you have let's say, for the lack of no other word, I have some alerts built in my dashboard, which when we see, then there is a need to do a communication with the restaurant. And that's precisely how it works.
And that can lead on to predictive analysis on what ingredients they need, or what ingredients they should no longer need. Well, actually, they don't need to use anymore for specific dishes. Fascinating.
Exactly. I mean, most of the food chains in the world, for example, some of the big pizza food chains in the world, they actually work exactly like this. I mean, we don't even ask them to upload. We integrate. They have a stock of their ingredients with them, and we just integrate with them, and that's how the sanity of the data is also protected.
Eugène, what about from the driver side? Let's talk a little bit about that, because I think, I mean, how do we, as you know, in the logistics space, make sure that we can actually attain, the demand for it and on time?
Yeah, I mean, the food delivery business, and I'm just speaking from the experience in our end in Indonesia, as a large country, right, with 170 million people. Our food industry has grown so fast that the logistics business can't keep up with the volume of transactions, currently being transacted in the big cities, and especially Jakarta as a main center of transactions, right? So as digitalization is going through the industry, we are not there yet, because many of the players are not geared up to take up from the driver's side, for example. I mean, you assign a driver with a vehicle, or you have a rider, and he has to drive a certain route. It comes back again to as Apoorva already said, right? You have to have the AI tools. You have to have a dynamic, scalable, dynamic solution, which change every day, because you can't just base it on a certain particular day. I think by AI you can actually identify, on a normal basis, that every day you have your certain spikes at certain hours of the day, and based on the result of the AI, you basically build your operating model on that particular day, right? Plus additional 20%, additional 10% capacity to take up additional spikes in area where they are needed, right? So obviously this is, it's a big challenge, obviously, when you have two types of restaurants. One restaurant is the home cloud. People were actually cooking at home and selling it on an application, and you have basically the restaurants on the offline space who are actually now decentralizing from centralized kitchen to a decentralized kitchen. So as this is, transforming the business model for us to execute and have, number one, have the right assets in the right area, right, at the right time. Plus, on top, you have to deal with the spike. So without technology, it's impossible. You can't execute. Customers going to be very, very disappointed, right? So I think, it's number one. AI needs to go to a certain way that it needs to, in some way, calculate what the spike will be. Yeah, I mean, obviously, AI, the longer you process the data, the most, closer you are to the actual condition as forecasted. But yeah, dynamic. I'm just speaking on the word term dynamic. You have to be dynamic these days in order to keep up with the spikes. And as our other colleague in Dubai already explained, the access, we know, drivers, restaurants, they're all variables in this whole gameplay in executing the food order. And I mean, AI is number one for me to depend on. Without the forecast and historical data analysis, you can't actually plan properly, and that will cost you, as a logistics company, it will cost you money. So
I agree completely with you, because I think it's also even a step further than that. I think it's also even the vehicle management behind it, because not all vehicles can actually be sent out to pick up certain groceries, especially if it's frozen. Refrigerated trucks, we know, cost a lot of money. So there's not, especially for logistic players, there's not much of them, especially for the small, medium ones, because they're actually extremely costly. So I'm guessing, how do you deal with prices like that? Maybe we should actually start with Apoorva in terms of like the ratio of like refrigerated food and beverages to more dry goods that don't require refrigerated vehicles. Where are we on that? Like, how do you handle I guess the spikes of that, and also the expectations from the logistic players being able to actually deliver correctly in the right the right delivery method. Yeah, exactly. Condition. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Look, so I think 3 points on this. Okay, I mean, to answer the pinpoint question, right? The goods which require refrigeration versus the goods which don't require refrigeration. Okay, if we break the logistics or the supply chain into sort of 3 pieces. Okay, one piece is really the storage in the warehouse, and let's ignore it for a while. And the second piece is really moving the bulk. Okay, so for example, I mean, we move today a big stock of ice creams from, let's say, the warehouse of the distributor to a retailer, okay, and that's mostly planned and it's milk run, etc. So that's two. And the third is obviously the last mile, when somebody's sitting on the app orders like a brick of ice cream, okay, from a supermarket or a restaurant nearby, and it's extremely hot. And I mean, we operate in Cairo, it's like burning hell there, okay, and it's extremely hot, and you have to make sure that the ice cream sort of reaches the house still, eatable. I mean, you just, so I think on the second leg there is a lot of planning which goes into hand, and it's not that time sensitive in terms of, it's not a 30-minute or a 15-minute turnaround delivery. Mostly it's like a few hour turnaround delivery, and then because you have more space, you have more capacity, so you can sort of work around it a bit. But I'll come back to that. Okay, on the last mile piece, which is probably more interesting and more relevant, there are three things which are very, very important. Okay, the first thing is the 15 or the 20 minutes when the food's going to be with the restaurant, in what packaging condition it is. Okay, and I mean, we have developed and we've procured also some aluminum foil, double strap based, sealed based packaging which can maintain the temperature for a while. And typically you have ice packs or gel boxes which you put inside with them, which sort of maintain the temperature. So that's one. Okay, second is the box of the rider. Okay, and if you look at the kind of fleet today I have in the last mile and food delivery, there is a foot rider, there is a bike rider, there is also a car rider. The bike rider has a box, sometimes they have a bag, okay? And assignment of the right driver. So we need to be very clear in our assignment app that this driver is what kind of driver and what kind of delivery box the driver is having, okay? And there is a certain box which which allows the temperature to be maintained for a certain time, etc. So that's the second thing, which is quite important. Okay, and the third thing is the real how do you minimize the time from when the restaurant will actually pick up the, let's say it's an ice cream. So what typically happens is the food delivery is packed, and then the restaurant typically puts the ice cream at a slab waiting for the driver to come. Okay, you literally have to ensure by a dispatch logic the driver is there at that point. The ice cream is not waiting for the driver. And also, like, when you reach the customer, I mean, how much time does it take to reach the customer? So that planning, geolocation, pin, confirmation of time, etc., that's also a little bit thinking. But most of the magic, safety, innovation goes in the packaging and the box, I would say, and how you sort of manage it.
And that's fantastic. Thank you for that response. Eugène, tell us what you think.
It's the same. It's the same way of thinking, and we currently as a company also focusing on traditional cooked food, right, outside of the city, which is going on a 6-7 hour line haul into Jakarta. And obviously one factor you count in is obviously is how do they pack it, number one, how do you transport it, number two, and how many change of hands of the product itself. Because currently all the logistics players are playing with their hub and spoke systems, the traditional hub and spoke systems, and traditionally they also combine food and normal packages at the same time, right? And so what I would say is obviously if you are seriously playing in the food logistics sort of set, keep it in, focus on food and don't play around with cargo in combination, because that's actually a danger to the food safety itself. And so we're doing this also on a daily basis. So we're running a 6-7 hour line haul into Jakarta. Use basically the 220 liter cool boxes with 15% of ice packs to keep it on a 7 to 12 degrees temperature. So the food is freshly cooked, and consumers, they require, and they are very, very critical they give critics, right, and feedback. If we can receive it today, we want to have it today. It can't be tomorrow. And there are so many players in the market who are just offering a delivery service, but it comes in the next day. And you can imagine, a chicken, a grilled chicken, or whatever it is, and it's in a paper bag, and it's packed in a way unacceptable for transportation, and there's no education to the seller it comes on our plate, as an executor of the business. So yes. So number one, what I would say is that the challenge is educating the food sellers. That's number one. It is very important. Number two, as rightfully said, Apoorva said just now about have the right person with the right equipment attached to the order, whether it's a bulk order or a single order. And number three is what is becoming very important. Understand. I mean, logistic companies need to understand the thought process behind food quality, right? And in some countries, like in Indonesia, food safety has not been an issue until recently. People are free to sell, but at a certain point, we'll see cases happening where the logistics standard in transporting temperature-controlled goods is not done properly, and you will see that people will get ill, or maybe there are fatal issues at the end of the day. So I take this as a number one,
Yeah,
standard. Food safety needs to be number one, and everything should be
absolutely.
around it. So.
And I agree, and we definitely see the whole idea of customers want things now. They don't want to wait longer. They don't want they want their inventory available to them to be able to have it transported to them. They also want, if for example they don't have an ingredient, can they do an on-demand order that they can receive it same day, next day? That seems to be something that's also very important. Let's talk a little bit about the innovations that are going on. I know that, for example, based on the stories that we have just shared, we have encountered the fact that, allocating to the right driver is crucial, because we know that it's not about the nearest location in general. It's about the right driver, the smart route that the driver has to take in order to actually get from point A to point B to C, D, E. Because I'm guessing in the food and beverage, as well as like for especially the restaurants, maybe there is also service level agreements that they have to take into consideration. So automating those service level agreements, especially from a technical side, must be complicated for a lot of logistic players, and especially also even allocating the right driver based on what Apoorva was mentioning for the right vehicle, the right motor, if it's the right equipment. So what technology have you been seeing out there that's been interesting, that has said, okay, you know what, that is changing the way we are delivering to food and FMBs?
Yeah, I mean, my experience in the last couple of months, the expense of cooling systems, mobile cooling system is tremendous, right? And as market grows and more vendors become available in each country, the cost for units are coming down. And then just saying on a motorcycle unit where you can have a mobile refrigeration unit on the back of the motorcycle, you have an investment of at least $800 to $1,000 per unit, right? So if you turn that around into what's the ROI on that investment, you're going to be delivering a lot of food first, before you get that earned back. So technology is available to have a seamless delivery, in terms of quality, keeping the quality of food persistently in the right format. But the cost to maintain this is tremendous expensive. So technology, as it goes, right? The first technology is coming out on mobile motorcycles. People invent such things. The price of the invention is high, but over time, I think it will come down as more vendors will enter the market, and especially with the guys from China who are very fast in multiplicating those units and produce it cheaper and for the market to use. But I think for people like us who are just entering this food business, cold transport, cold chain, yes, the initial investment is if you're serious about it, you have to spend and sell it at 100% food safety grade, instead of going by volume and your SLA is going haywire, and you're getting after 1 week you're thrown out of the market. You're not being credible.
Becomes survival of the fittest, right?
Correct.
So, Apoorva, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
What are people doing in terms of making food delivery greener, such as sustainable packaging? Like what's out there that is starting to, because it's becoming a hot topic, and it's always been, but now it's even more so. You know, we're in the bio space, we're in the, you know, we're in the keeping things green. Now orders, for example, need to have like the little green leaf with carbon, like companies want to know carbon emissions. What have you seen?
Look, we recently took a ESG pledge, and we have sort of introduced a lot of things as an output or as a process for doing that. Okay. At high level, I mean, you know, we talk about the same axis again. Okay. I think first part of moving towards that direction is really giving it the right level of education, awareness, and communication in with all our stakeholders. Okay. And we do now tell in our app to the customers that, you know, you have the options of looking for those kind of packagings, etc. Green packaging, it might cost you, etc. Do not ask for cutlery if you don't need, etc. Okay. There is also a lot of education which we give to the restaurants about it. We tell them, look, it's an important thing for us. There are a few restaurants which actually are in the mission with them. They take pride in it. There are a few restaurants who actually are not. I mean, I can tell you, like very recently, I was on a delivery run, and I had to cover like 8 or 9 restaurants in that day. And one of the biggest, biggest, hottest selling restaurants, I mean, they keep standard boxes prepared of packaging because they're shipping like stuff very fast, and they don't read the instructions that this order needs cutlery or doesn't. They just keep putting it in boxes. And I had to spend a lot of time telling them that, look, it's important. And they were like, yes, we understand, but you know, we have things done and we need to move things in 1 minute faster, etc., etc. So there's certain education to the restaurants about it. There's a lot of awareness on what kind of packaging to use. We also encourage our drivers and customers to return back packaging sometimes, especially for supermarket orders. Okay, we tell them that, look, if you give it back, we're going to give you credit, you some points. I tell my drivers, if you go to a customer and you can get the big box in which we deliver the big carton supermarket back, I pay certain amount to the driver as an incentive to get the box back. It's money for us, and it makes a lot of sense to recycle it. Okay, so that's basically that. And then of course on the footprint, look, we've recently procured a fleet of EV vehicles in some of the most crowded neighborhoods in Nairobi, in Lagos. We are beginning to do deliveries on cycle, and it's sort of more economical and sometimes much more faster also than motorcycles. One of the very big problem we face is parking. Okay, and this problem gets marginalized substantially with a cycle or with a skateboard. Okay, so like for example, now in Lagos I have a small fleet of riders which are doing deliveries on skateboard. Okay, and it's then electronic skates, so they don't have to park, and it's faster. Sometimes they don't have to hit signals. And also there are some innovations, but we're not doing innovations for the sake of ESG. They should make sense in business also, and we're realizing that there are possibilities of having it win-win.
That is fantastic. I might get my marketing team to come talk to you about that whole skateboard thing so we can do a case study on it. That is
it's a super cool video. Huh? It's a super cool video that, you know, we talked about it, a rider coming in skateboards, and it helps in driver capacity, you know, in some of the neighborhoods which are very university students and all, where gig economy is kind of possible. I want these students to work, like, you know, we have peak demand at between 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. And a lot of these students their classes are getting over. They would be happy to earn, you know, $5 tonight, which they can buy their, you know, momos and soup from in the evening, and it works for us.
Wonderful. And I just have to mention, I did like the fact that you do driver runs also. That for me, you know, from an entrepreneur perspective, that's awesome because it teaches you so much about what's going on the other side of this, you know, the other side of the table, plus that side of the actual driver. That really gives a clear image, a different image.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Look, I mean, you can obviously sit on and develop tools and stuff, but most of the things you learn is by observing user behavior. And sometimes users are not, I'll give you a very, very good example. Okay, we recently have changed all the equipments. Okay, And in one of the delivery runs, one of my teammates realized that, the driver basically has to stop. Then when they cross the bike, they have to stop, they took the phone, they have arrived at the location, they have to open a screen lock, and then they have to, like, it's a 2 minute, sometimes 1.5 to 2 minutes effort. Okay. And then we work with an equipment manufacturer to come up with things which are based on gyros and motion sensors. So when the bike stops, the phone knows that the driver is stopping and they have arrived at the location when they're at a particular 100-meter GPS coordination. This no driver would tell me. No driver, or this will never come up in any insight. This is only when you learn, you can say, the guy is stopping 1 minute here. I mean, I need to reduce this 1 minute. It's absolute waste of time. And this someone who has a little bit of a sense of tech, little bit of sense of authority and power, what I can go back and talk in my company when they're on the ground, they observe, and then they can make that difference, right? So it's a strong example.
I feel like we have to have another webinar just about telematics and talk about how we can track drivers and how we can improve all that, especially, it's the new way forward in terms really understanding and applying technology to it. So I think we need to do a whole different session on this. But let's move on to Q&A, and because we've got 3 questions. I'll start with the one for Eugène. So Eugène, in your opinion, how important is it to do a trial and error to find out the delivery time, especially to maintain the freshness of the food or drink you bring? If you did, how long ideally you did the trial and error? So how long?
Okay. All right. I just tell you the start. We earlier this year, when we were planning the long haul same day food delivery service, we've done actually 1 week trials. Yeah, 1 week of trials, meaning to say is to buy food every day, and all type of food, right? Food can, consist of many ingredients. And in Indonesia, and it's probably the same also in India, a very, very important ingredient is coconut milk. Coconut milk is a major ingredient in the food sold here. But it also has a very huge sensitivity on temperature differences, right? Going from a cold to a warm environment back to a cold environment. So the coconut milk expires rather quickly if you're not careful, right? So what we did is we're doing it all over again. The exercise. I appointed a panel of 10 employees, basically, different kind of people, put them in the meeting room. I had a van coming with 10 or 12 items every day, coming this into Jakarta, and we basically, without looking at the food, did how was it packaged? Number one, right? How was it packaged? Is just to have this customer experience, right? Is it correctly packed? How's the experience? Do you like it or you don't like it? Any feedback from the staff first, right? Number two, you open the package. First, what comes up to mind is smell, right? You smell the food. If the smell is correct, you then taste the food, because if the initial smell is half, or you don't trust it because of the smell, naturally you won't taste the food because you're afraid that you get poisoned, or the food is already not consumable, right? So we did this on typical dishes which were ordered frequently by consumers in Jakarta, and we tested also the temperatures, right? So the way forward, right? When you do these tests, it's all manual, right? You have a 220 cool box. You have 15% of packs inside. You have a thermometer on the cool box, to maintain temperature. At the time it goes in, it already has, like say 6-7 degrees. But when the food comes in, it goes up and it stays stable. And the temperature is measured up to the time the fan arrives. That's why I say I apply a two hand operation, right? You can only switch maximum 2 hands. If you do more than 2 hands, definitely deterioration of the food, because it will stay in open space in a different exposed to a temperature. So I would say, for those people who raise that question, do it at least on a 1 week basis. Try different type of foods with different type of ingredients, but choose those which are very sensitive to temperature, and make the call. and make the call. And you know, if the food is not good, you have to trace it back. And maybe this is also very important for the future if you talk about technology. Transparency of data on the whole end-to-end process from the restaurant up to the delivery up to the consumer. The consumer should know that the food has been transported at this temperature, that constant temperature. There's all these checkpoints, right? So that, you know, the consumer can, you know, he's satisfied and knows that what he's eating is safe. And so 1 week, do this every day, different type of dishes, and you will know the answer at the end of the week what you're doing wrong.
Absolutely. I mean, no one wants to eat any perishable food. So actually that leads on to the next question that we have, and this can be answered by either one of you, is how do we actually make sure that those deliveries are reached to the right, you know, to the right receiver on time? Like, how is that communicated so that there's, you know, not food waste, or food waste is to almost minimal or zero? What's being done about that?
Look, in the restaurant and food delivery business, we call it the loss rate. It's quite minimal. I think it's almost negligible, partially because the receiver is expecting food, and maybe there are situations and circumstances for some reason they would not be available. Okay, and it's quite unfortunate that when happens, but the loss rate is quite low. It's very, very low. It's a minimal number. Okay. Typically, when such a situation might arrive, there are two kinds of approaches to solve them. Obviously, the driver is empowered a little bit. They have the access, the phone, the message, the information. The technology also tells the customer that your food is here, please come and pick up, etc. The driver is empowered if they're not able to reach the customer to leave the food bag with a person, a receptionist, and is able to send the message to the customer that, you know, I've dropped it with this person, etc. So that's the approach one. Okay, and the second approach is if that's also not possible, typically our drivers are able to flag you know, to our backend systems, and we have a support center that, okay, look, I'm not able to reach out to this customer. Maybe the address was not right. Maybe the phone number is wrongly inputted or something like that. And in that case, our customer, we have a set of team which is trying to solve the problem. It's unfortunate for the driver because the driver typically misses out on next delivery, but that's really where it goes.
Yeah.
Thank you. A few more questions for Eugène. You mentioned that food safety has not been a concern in Indonesia until recently. If you could elaborate a little bit on this, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, and look at this, you know, from the players in the market, right? We have all the major platforms in Indonesia were you know, in this food space, and all of the deliveries are on instant deliveries, so to say, right? Instant deliveries. So when I speak about food safety until recently, you talk about, you know, number one, it's hygiene, right? Hygiene, how you call this, you know, cleanness of the packing itself, of the driver itself, of the vehicle he brings. Plus number two, obviously, is the quality of food itself, right? As you know, you have currently in Indonesia, the platforms were actually aggregating all the restaurants into their app, and they have their riders everywhere in the city at all the dense places, and they execute it in such way that they make the most out of the driver, the most out of the route, right? And what I am saying is always that you know, the delivery of that package or of that food, where you have a restaurant where 10 people or 10 riders are queuing for the same restaurant, right? And they're waiting and they're taking the food, bringing it to somebody's home. Anything in between the restaurant and your home, anything can happen, right? You don't know what happens. Number one, right? The riders, they have a small salary, you know, and all the major platforms are pushing a lot of pressure on the cost, right? And the incentives of the riders are not being great anymore. It's shrinking day by day, right? Because all the global platforms need to recover from the money they've invested into these platforms from day one. So the money burning practices has an impact on on delivery quality and food safety also, because they don't put too much attention on food safety. It's all about, can I move with less people the most volume, right? And there goes your standard, because your standard can't be maintained on this level if you're applying such way, number one, and number two, with giving a driver a high number of packages or runs on a day to apply a certain incentive to the rider, will also have impact on the quality of how he executes the order, that particular order. So food safety, in Indonesia is currently still very weak, relatively weak in enforcement from the government, on putting a certain standard there. I mean, plastic is thrown out of the market. There's no plastic currently allowed to be packed, used as packaging materials in the supermarket. That's an effort from the government. But if you speak about clean kitchens, right, clean drivers, kept into a box, which has been properly cleaned and sprayed, and especially in a time of COVID at the moment, right? Those things matter. Those things matter. And but we're not there yet. I'm just saying that for me, as a startup in the food delivery business space, I focus on high standards. I focus on food safety. And even it cost me a higher price, the consumer is also willing to pay for that. And I think with that thought behind it, it must be possible to build a good, sustainable food delivery business, taking into account, the high standards you have to maintain. You can't go low.
Let's talk about, because one thing I think that has happened with with COVID is that it has forced people to become, I guess there's a lot more higher standards when it comes to hygiene. I mean, people look now, if there's the gel, if people have actually cleaned the tables, or, even the way things are being delivered. I mean, I know Singapore went out of its way to actually get the drivers to really almost spray down and wrap the back, wrap the receiving goods. So, I mean, people are doing a lot. So in terms of COVID, how did you guys handle the demand in the proper way? So how in the proper, keeping everybody safe, drivers, restaurants, bars, how was that? Apoorva, do you want to tackle this one?
Yeah, look, it was difficult. Okay, it is not something which we were ready for. Nobody was ready for what came, and it was quite difficult. Okay, it took us some time to think through this and sort of position ourselves in the right place to make sure that we are able to sort of manage this. And being an e-commerce and food delivery player in Africa, it also puts substantial pressure, not just on safety and hygiene standards, but also on the demand. Our demands went through the roof, and it was quite difficult initially to cope up with. Okay, I think the basics were in place very quickly. The basics were that, we are taking the temperature of every employee, and, we are maintaining some kind of data chart and those kind of things. So the basic first level checkups were in place quite quickly and very fast. Okay. Then after that, there was also a lot of focus on SOPs, so the standard operating process, which would be used to handle anything, and we had to combine the SOP with the speed, etc. So there was some trial and error, some experimentation done. Can we give sanitizer sachets? What kind of boxes? What kind of sprays can you give to the driver, etc.? How many times are they cleaning? And do we audit the restaurant? Do we not audit the restaurant? What do we do? Those kind of things. Okay, and stuff like that. Okay. What we started doing after a period of time is we started being very transparent about the information to the customer. Most of the customers are looking for hygiene standards, but also are looking for peace of mind. Okay. And we started giving very transparent data to the customers. So the customer sort of sees that, okay, your food is going to be delivered by the driver Apoorva Kumar was last tested PCR on 30th of June and was result negative, and the last body temperature check was today morning and it was 36 degrees or whatever, and that was one. Second, we also made sure that the restaurants are putting right disclaimer and guarantees. So we allowed, like, we sort of introduced some kind of provision for the restaurants to say, look, we are operating as per COVID standards, and if you want, you can go to this link and download our certificate, etc., and those kind of things. So we give some level of transparency and peace of the mind to the customer. That was helpful for us to continue the business. One of the big problems we had to face was we had to really increase the supply of our fleet, our workforce, and that took some taking. We had to bring a lot of people in, we had to train them, we had to introduce referral programs, we had to pay more. Okay. And
I'm guessing that helps handle the spike.
Yeah, of course, but it was not just spike, right? I mean, we knew that this is going to stay for a while, so we are basically building capacity rather than we are handling spike. Okay. And it took us some time. You have to train these people well. Because of it's funny, but it's something which you learn only on the ground. Okay. Because of COVID, a lot of buildings and offices went down. As a result, a lot of security companies did not have a job for security guards. Okay. And that was my first reaction. I went to the 2 security companies we used in Nigeria and said, okay, what do you do with your guard? I want to know all the guards who have driving licenses. And we sort of, you look at this way, when you're ground, you look at practical ways of getting people in. The cab drivers, we know that Bolt and Uber, they lost a lot of customers. So we went to, typically those cab drivers are sort of managed by what is called supply agents for Uber or Bolt, etc. And we went to them and said, look, how about your cars doing some food delivery for us? And it's not great money for them, but it still works. Okay. So those kind of things we would do.
Thank you so much for that answer. And on that note, we're going to wrap it up. So I would like to ask both of you, if you don't mind, sharing how anyone in the audience can reach you. We do have a few questions left, but unfortunately, we will not be able to answer them. So maybe they can contact you directly. So Eugène, if you don't mind sharing not your phone number, but your LinkedIn or email, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, guys, if you have questions or you want to share something about this topic with me, you can find me on LinkedIn. Eugène Kastanja is on the profile on LinkedIn. And other than that, you can also send an email. My email address is COO@MGXPRESS with an X, PRESS.id. And otherwise, you're definitely able to find me in LinkedIn. So I'll be there.
Thank you.
Yeah. Same for me, LinkedIn. And then my email is apoorva.kumar@jumia.com. APOORVA.KUMAR.
Thank you both. Thank you so much for this amazing episode number 5. And we look forward to having you guys back, because we have so much more to talk about. Thank you, everybody, for having joined us. It's been fantastic. And I wish everybody a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.